Becky Lynch goes brutal with Seth Rollins backstage after divorce cards. The wrestling world just witnessed something that makes CM Punk's pipe bomb look like a bedtime story. What happened between Becky Lynch and Seth Rollins backstage at Monday Night Raw wasn't just a lover's quarrel, it was a career-ending verbal massacre that has left WWE officials scrambling and fans questioning everything they thought they knew about wrestling's golden couple. Sources inside WWE are calling it the most explosive backstage confrontation since the Montreal Screwjob, and after you hear what the man unleashed on her husband behind closed doors, you'll understand why multiple superstars have already requested transfers to SmackDown just to avoid the fallout. This isn't just about a marriage falling apart, this is about Becky Lynch destroying Seth Rollins so completely that even Triple H had to step in before things got physical. But before we dive into the carnage that unfolded in gorilla position, let me ask you something that's going to eat at you for the rest of this video. What would you do if you discovered your spouse had been planning your professional destruction for months while smiling in your face every single night? Because that's exactly what Becky Lynch found out, and her response was so brutal, so calculated, and so devastating that it's already being called the real reason behind WWE's recent roster shakeups. The divorce papers weren't just legal documents, they were Seth's declaration of war against everything Becky had built. And when the man fights back, she doesn't just swing for the fences. She burns the entire stadium down and salts the earth where it stood. What she said to Seth in that hallway will haunt him for the rest of his career, assuming he still has one after this week. Here's what really happened, and why WWE is desperately trying to keep this story buried deeper than Undertaker's WrestleMania streak. It started 3 weeks ago when Becky Lynch walked into the women's locker room at the Toyota Center in Houston and found something that would change everything. Hidden inside her gym bag was a folder containing documents that Seth had accidentally left behind, documents that revealed a conspiracy so shocking it makes the Authority storyline look like child's play. Seth Rollins hadn't just been planning their divorce. He'd been working with WWE management to systematically dismantle Becky's push, her storylines, and her future in the company. The papers showed detailed discussions about how to transition Becky out of the main event picture and redirect her heat to other female superstars. There were text message screenshots between Seth and certain unnamed executives discussing how Becky's difficult personality was becoming a backstage problem that needed to be handled. But that wasn't the worst part. The folder contained a proposal written in Seth's own handwriting outlining how their divorce could be used as a storyline to elevate him while positioning Becky as the villain who abandoned her family for her career. He literally wanted to turn their real-life marriage ending into content that would damage her reputation while painting him as the sympathetic victim. When Becky discovered this betrayal, she didn't cry. She didn't throw things. She did something far more terrifying. She started planning. For 3 weeks, the man methodically gathered evidence, recorded conversations, and built a case that would expose not just Seth's duplicity, but the entire network of backstage politics that he'd been using against her. Last Monday at Raw, everything exploded. The confrontation happened right after Seth's segment with Cody Rhodes. Becky was waiting in the tunnel when he came through the curtain, and what followed was 23 minutes of the most brutal character assassination ever witnessed in WWE's backstage area. Multiple sources confirmed that Becky didn't raise her voice once during the entire exchange. She simply and methodically destroyed every aspect of Seth's career, his reputation, and his future in wrestling. She started by revealing that she knew about the folder, about the conspiracy, and about his plan to weaponize their divorce. But then she went deeper. Becky exposed business dealings that Seth had been hiding, personal conversations he'd betrayed, and professional relationships he'd manipulated. She revealed that Seth had been taking credit for storyline ideas that she'd created, that he'd been sabotaging other wrestlers' opportunities to make himself look better, and that his locker room leader persona was nothing but a carefully crafted lie. The most devastating moment came when Becky pulled out her phone and played audio recordings of Seth talking to WWE executives about how ungrateful and difficult to work with she'd become since becoming a mother. In these recordings, Seth suggested that Becky's priorities were no longer aligned with what was best for business, and that maybe it was time for her to step back from her main event role. Here's where it gets even more insane, because what happened next proves that Becky Lynch isn't just the man in the ring. She's the man in every aspect of this business. While Seth had been scheming behind her back, Becky had been building her own network of allies. She revealed that she had been in secret negotiations with AEW, that she had trademark applications filed for several of her catchphrases that WWE thought they owned, and that she had been documenting every instance of gender discrimination and unfair treatment that she'd witnessed or experienced during her time with the company. But the nuclear bomb she dropped was this: Becky told Seth that she had been offered a position as AEW's head of women's wrestling development, with complete creative control over the women's division and a salary that would make his current contract look like lunch money. And she was seriously considering taking it, specifically because of what he had done. The psychological warfare that followed was something that veteran wrestlers are calling unprecedented. Becky systematically dismantled every accomplishment Seth thought he'd earned on his own merit, revealing how many of his opportunities had come because of her influence, her ideas, and her willingness to put him over in both professional and personal situations. She told him that his Universal Championship reign was only successful because she had rewritten half of his promos behind the scenes. She revealed that his comeback from injury was accelerated because she had personally lobbied Triple H and Stephanie McMahon on his behalf. She exposed that several of his biggest feuds were built on storyline concepts that she had originally pitched for herself but had allowed him to use instead. The most brutal part was when Becky told Seth that she had been protecting him from backstage criticism for years, deflecting complaints about his attitude and his performance, and that once she stopped running interference for him, he would discover exactly what the locker room really thought of his leadership. By the time Becky finished speaking, Seth Rollins was reportedly standing in stunned silence while multiple WWE officials who had gathered to watch the confrontation were trying to figure out how to handle what they just witnessed. But Becky wasn't done. The final blow was personal, professional, and devastating in ways that will impact Seth's career for years to come. She told him that their daughter would grow up knowing that her father chose his ego over his family, that he tried to destroy her mother's career out of jealousy and insecurity, and that every time she achieves something great in life, she'll remember that her dad couldn't handle her mom being more successful than him. Then Becky delivered the line that has already become legendary backstage: "You wanted to be the man so badly that you forgot what it actually means to be a man. Congratulations, Seth. You played yourself so hard that you lost the only person who ever actually believed you deserved to be called a champion." The aftermath of this confrontation has been seismic. Within 48 hours, multiple wrestlers publicly posted supportive messages about Becky on social media, using language that clearly positioned them on her side of whatever was happening behind the scenes. Several women's wrestlers have reportedly approached management asking to work programs with Becky, seeing alignment with her as career advancement in the wake of her showing such political strength. Meanwhile, Seth has been notably absent from several backstage meetings and creative sessions. Sources say he's been keeping a low profile while trying to rebuild relationships that were damaged by Becky's revelations about his behind-the-scenes behavior. The real question that's driving WWE officials crazy is this: how much of what Becky said was truth, and how much was strategic warfare designed to destroy Seth's backstage credibility? Because either way, it's working. Seth's influence in creative discussions has reportedly diminished significantly, and several storylines that were being built around him have been quietly shelved or redirected. Here's what makes this situation even more complex: Becky's contract situation is now the most closely guarded secret in WWE. Multiple sources confirm that she has been in meetings with legal and creative teams almost daily since the confrontation, but nobody knows whether these meetings are about extending her deal, modifying her current arrangement, or preparing for her departure. What we do know is that Becky Lynch has completely rewritten the power dynamics in WWE's main event scene. Her willingness to burn bridges, expose business practices, and wage psychological warfare has established her as someone who cannot be manipulated, controlled, or marginalized through traditional backstage politics. The divorce proceedings have taken on an entirely different character now. What started as a private family matter has become a battle for professional survival in an industry where reputation and relationships determine everything. Seth's legal team is reportedly struggling with how to handle divorce negotiations with someone who has demonstrated such a complete understanding of business leverage and political warfare. But here's where the story takes its most interesting turn, and why this situation is far from over. WWE officials are now faced with an impossible choice. Becky Lynch has made it clear that she will no longer tolerate being undervalued, undermined, or manipulated. She's demonstrated that she has options outside of WWE, allies within the company, and the willingness to use nuclear tactics to protect her interests. Essentially, she's forced WWE to treat her as an equal partner in her own career rather than someone whose booking can be determined by backstage politics and personal relationships. Seth, meanwhile, has discovered that his position in the company was far more dependent on Becky's support than he realized. The locker room leader role that he thought he'd earned through merit was actually something that existed partly because Becky had been running interference for him behind the scenes. Without her protection and advocacy, he's finding out what people really think about his attitude, his performance, and his leadership style. The most fascinating aspect of this entire situation is how it's revealed the true power structure in modern wrestling. Becky Lynch didn't just expose Seth Rollins, she exposed how gender dynamics, personal relationships, and backstage politics intersect to determine opportunities and booking decisions in ways that fans never see. Her willingness to threaten WWE with legal action over gender discrimination, to leverage outside opportunities from AEW, and to weaponize her knowledge of business practices has essentially forced the company to renegotiate their relationship with her from a position of strength rather than dependency. What happened between Becky Lynch and Seth Rollins backstage wasn't just a marital dispute that got out of hand. It was a masterclass in professional warfare, a demonstration of how to use industry knowledge and strategic thinking to completely flip power dynamics in your favor. Seth Rollins thought he was playing chess by planning to use their divorce as storyline content while undermining Becky's position in the company. But Becky Lynch was playing 4D chess while he was still trying to figure out how the pieces moved. The question now isn't whether their marriage can be saved, it's whether Seth's career can recover from being outmaneuvered so completely by someone he underestimated so badly. And here's the part that should terrify every wrestler who's ever tried to play backstage politics. Becky Lynch just proved that she's better at this game than anyone realized. She didn't just survive an attempt to sabotage her career, she turned it into an opportunity to strengthen her position while exposing the weaknesses in her opposition. Now let me ask you something, and I want you to really think about this before you answer in the comments. Do you think Becky Lynch planned this entire confrontation from the moment she found those documents, or do you think she's just naturally that good at psychological warfare? Because the level of preparation and strategic thinking she demonstrated suggests someone who had been preparing for this exact scenario for a long time. And here's another question that's going to keep you up at night. If Becky Lynch is willing to destroy Seth Rollins this completely over personal betrayal, what do you think she's capable of doing to anyone else who tries to undermine her in this business? The wrestling industry just learned that Becky Lynch isn't just the man in terms of drawing power and in-ring ability. She's the man when it comes to protecting her interests, controlling her narrative, and outmaneuvering anyone who thinks they can manipulate her. Seth Rollins found out the hard way that you don't play games with someone who's better at playing games than you are. And the rest of WWE just learned that Becky Lynch has officially graduated from being a top star to being someone who can reshape the entire landscape of professional wrestling when she decides it's necessary. The question isn't what happens next in this story. The question is who else is going to find out what happens when you underestimate the man. Tell me in the comments, do you think Seth Rollins can recover from this backstage destruction, or has Becky Lynch ended his main event career with this one conversation? And more importantly, do you think other wrestlers are now afraid to cross Becky Lynch after seeing what she's capable of when someone betrays her trust? Because if this story proves anything, it's that the man doesn't just come around, the man comes around with receipts, recordings, and the strategic mind to use them at exactly the right moment for maximum damage. Seth Rollins wanted a war. Becky Lynch gave him one. And it wasn't even close.